Hello everybody, this is Group 4 and the title of our project is Airbnb recommendation. If you have ever traveled to somewhere, you know that finding a good destination based on your desire is one of the hardest parts of traveling. You may have tons of recommendations from friends, websites about where to travel, but many of these recommendations may not be of your interest. As a matter of fact, one of the most popular online recommendation platform is Airbnb. However, its recommendation system can be a lot more improved by using a better analysis from the data of people using it book their travel. Also, the better recommendation system, more people will use it and more revenue for Airbnb. But the data is so huge to be looked at manually and do analysis. This is a real bottleneck, and in this project, we've tried to address it. With this in mind, we define our objective as to understand what are patterns of people who successfully book a visit on their first try. And to address it, in part one, we answered the questions what countries are being visited the most, when is this happening, and who is making these visits. And in part two, we address the question what are patterns of users who book versus who don't, that is, devices or activities. And finally, we answer the question can we recommend a country that a user will book on the first try?
With enormous data from Airbnb, we were interested in analyzing the trend for each country. From the plot on the right, we see that almost half of the users had booked their destination in the United States, followed by France and Italy. On the left, we see an exponentially increased trend for countries from 2010 to the peak before summer 2014. However, the rate drastically dropped at least by half after that. Interestingly, in all countries, there are more travelers in summer than in winter. The rate of traveling is similar in Europe region, and the rate for users traveling to United States is constantly higher than other countries. Here, we have a plot for user demographic. Most of the travelers are below 40 years old, and male users are a bit less frequent to travel than female users in all ages.
Now we are going to investigate the activity data of the users. First, we want to know what steps are taken when booking a destination. As shown below, view and click are two of the most common actions that a user will do. We also find that users who successfully find the destination spend more time, especially on viewing. This indicates that if you want to find an ideal destination, you need to be patient and view the information carefully. Then we want to know whether the language will cause any inconvenience when booking. As shown below, we pick 10 most commonly used languages and plot the distribution of time consuming. Here we see that there is no significant difference among languages, which means the compatibility of languages is pretty good. Finally, we hope to find the most convenient device for booking. We plot the success rate on each device type. The y-axis is sorted by the frequency of each device. Here we see that desktop device has a significant advantages over tablets and smartphones, which is reasonable because desktop devices can provide more information at a time and are easier to operate.
In part three, we want to understand whether we can build a recommendation system that can accurately predict where a new user will book their first travel experience. Now, the workflow for this recommendation system can be illustrated here in this block diagram. We can understand this in three simple phases, which first begins with discovering the data by selecting and engineering features from the raw data, then developing the model, which consists of training and evaluating it, then finally the deployment of this trained model. And the next few slides will then cover these phases in more detail. And so when predicting a country recommendation from a user, we have 10 possible choices, which range from the US, Australia, to other. And the F in this case is our negative label for being unable to recommend a country. And so from the data analytics we saw earlier in the presentation, We understood some relevant features are age, gender, and the activity sessions, as we've outlined here in this example. With these selected and engineered features, we can now select and train our model. And so, of these model selections, we chose a mixture of discriminative and generative models to test in a 5-fold cross-validation. And from the results, we found that XGB would be the best to train and evaluate using the data sets to the right in this table. Now, in terms of evaluating the model, we are using a ranking quality metric that is often used in major web search companies called the NDCG, or Normalized Discounted Cumulative Gain. So using a binary relevance scale, the NDCG scores our predicted recommendations by accumulating the relevance of the recommendation from the top of the result list to the bottom, where the relevance is discounted if it is found at lower ranks. And in our case, this is done over 5 predictions. And so from our model development, we're able to achieve a final NDCG score of 87%. And so to the left of these scores is an ablation study of our engineered features that overall contributed to this final performance, which we found that exploiting the elapsed time activities and seasons had the most impact by itself.
We developed a web application demo of our Airbnb recommendation systems. Suppose you are a user of our application system who is planning to travel, and this demo here shows the recommended countries for you based on our models described before. So by clicking the generating user ID here, our system will randomly assign you a user ID and the important features associated with it. And by clicking the recommended country button here, it gives you a recommended country list below that. So for instance, if I click the US here, it gives you a brief introduction of this country and the popular age, gender, and the popular season for those who come to travel. The same for the France here and the Italy. And below that, for better visualizations, our system shows a world map for the users that just for indicating where those 3 recommended countries are located.
In conclusion, our work includes 2 parts, analysis and recommendation. For the analysis part, we found that first, people between the 20s and the late 30s are traveling the most. And second, the most popular destination is the United States. And third, the peak season for traveling is summer. For the recommendation part, we deployed our interactive systems to AWS with an accuracy of 87%.